You've probably felt it, without being able to name it. A show ends, the credits roll, and you're sitting there with something hollow in your chest. That very particular feeling of having been let down by something you trusted. The show just stopped earning what it was asking you to accept. I felt it with Stranger Things. Sat there after the finale thinking, okay, so that's it then. Years of watching these kids grow up, watching the mythology get bigger and stranger and more ambitious, and the ending felt like someone had pressed a reset button and called it closure. My friend texted me immediately. 2 words. That's it? Game of Thrones, Lost, How I Met Your Mother, Dexter. Some of the most ambitious shows ever made. Shows that ran for years, built enormous audiences, created cultural moments people still argue about. They also ended badly. In almost every case, the ending damaged the entire series retroactively, the way a crack in a foundation changes how you understand everything above it. Stranger Things and The Boys just joined that conversation. Both shows ran for years, both built devoted audiences, both had seasons people genuinely loved, and when each one finally wrapped, the reaction was the same complicated mix: relief, disappointment, arguments about whether the ending earned what came before it. 2 very different shows, 2 very different finales, and the same lingering question hanging over both of them. The question is never really about the final episode. It's about what the writing was doing, or not doing, in the years leading up to it. When you look at the shows that got it wrong, the same failures keep repeating. Different shows, same mistakes. These are the patterns. I'm Mac, by the way. Welcome to Mac and Flicks. Before the craft failures, there's something that sits underneath all of them. Something the audience never sees, and the writers rarely talk about openly. Television is a business, and when a show becomes successful, the business doesn't want it to end. Think about what a hit show actually is from a network's perspective. Merchandise, convention deals, streaming subscriptions that people keep renewing because the show is still going, licensing, spin-offs, brand equity. When you end the story well, you end the revenue stream. So the incentives all point in one direction: keep it alive. The story designed for 4 seasons gets stretched to 7. The one built for 3 goes to 6. Writers get contracted for a set run. The numbers hold, and suddenly they're writing seasons they never planned. The story has to keep going long after the original plan ended, and that changes everything. The decisions stop being about what the story needs and start being about what keeps people talking between episodes. I think about Stranger Things a lot when I think about this. The Duffer Brothers originally conceived it as something close to a limited series, a contained story about Will Byers and the Upside Down. The first season ended in a place that could have been the whole thing. Then the numbers came in. Netflix saw what they had. And the show designed to end kept going. Each new season requiring the writers to build something new on a foundation never designed to bear that weight. This pressure creates a recognizable pattern. When a show gets extended past the point where its story naturally ends, writers stop running out of plot and start making decisions based on what will maintain audience engagement rather than what serves the story. Every choice gets filtered through a question the first season never had to ask. How do we keep people talking about this? For the first time, writers can actually see audience expectations forming in real time. Reddit threads, YouTube essays, Twitter discussions with thousands of retweets. And that creates a trap. Meet fan expectations and you get accused of being predictable. Subvert them and you risk alienating the audience. What gets lost in that calculation is the third option. Write what the story actually requires, regardless of what anyone expected. I watched the Game of Thrones fandom fracture in real time in 2019. The Night King's identity, Azor Ahai, the prince that was promised. Entire YouTube channels built around these questions, millions of views, people genuinely invested in where the mythology was heading. Then the final season arrived, and essentially none of it paid off the way the theorizing anticipated. The showrunners admitted they deliberately avoided the expected answers. Avoiding the expected answer and delivering a true answer are 2 completely different things. The audience could feel which one they got. This is what gets called fan service writing. Fan service means giving audiences what they say they want. The couple they've been shipping, the villain they've been theorizing about, the hero moment they've been waiting for. The problem is that what audiences say they want and what actually makes a satisfying story are often different things. The audience wants to feel good in the moment. A story needs to stay true to its own logic. When writers fill finales with fan service payoffs, they're answering audience questions instead of story questions. Everything gets addressed. The finale still feels hollow. J.J. Abrams, the filmmaker behind franchises like Mission Impossible, Star Wars, and Star Trek, once described the blank page of a script as a magic box. The power of the box, he said, comes from remaining closed. Whatever's inside could be anything. Open it and you commit to a single finite reality, and that reality almost never matches what people imagined. That philosophy became the engine of modern television. It generates theories, fan communities, social media debates between episodes, the feeling that you're watching something that rewards close attention. The mystery box works brilliantly, for a while. The problem it ignores is this. A mystery is a question. A story is a question with an answer built into it from the beginning. Those are two genuinely different things, and confusing them creates a debt that comes due at the worst possible moment. Alfred Hitchcock had a rule for suspense he called the bomb under the table. If two characters are sitting at a table and a bomb explodes, the audience gets 15 seconds of shock. But if you show the audience the bomb under the table before the conversation starts, those same 15 seconds become 15 minutes of unbearable tension. His point was about trust. You tell the audience what's coming so they're invested in every moment leading to it. Great storytelling works the same way. The writer knows where the story ends, plants answers in the setup, and when the finale arrives, everything clicks into place. The mystery box works the opposite way. Hitchcock earns attention by being transparent about where the danger is. The mystery box earns it by being deliberately opaque. Questions come first, answers get figured out later, if at all. One approach trusts the audience, the other keeps them guessing and bets that guessing will feel like enough. It does, for a while. Until the finale arrives and the box has to be opened. Every new question introduced without a resolution behind it is a promise. This strangeness has a logic to it. This will mean something. Season by season, those promises stack up. The debt grows. And this creates a really specific problem. An unanswered mystery lets the audience project their own perfect explanation onto the story. The box holds whatever they can imagine, which means it holds something better than any single answer the writers could actually provide. Whatever you dream up in the gaps between seasons, the writers are going to struggle to match it. The moment the finale arrives and the box has to be opened, all that infinite possibility collapses into one finite answer. And that answer almost never matches what years of theorizing had built in the audience's head. The only way to win that comparison is to have planted the answer so thoroughly throughout the series that the audience recognizes it the moment it arrives. So the feeling isn't disappointment at the gap between expectation and reality. It's the satisfaction of something finally named that was always there. When a show can't pay that debt, it pivots. The mythology goes unanswered. The finale shifts to something emotional, something character-driven, something that works on its own terms but has nothing to do with the questions the show spent years raising. Lost did exactly this. 6 seasons of mysteries, a finale that abandoned most of them, and an audience so confused that many of them invented their own explanation for what the show had actually been about. That invented explanation still circulates 15 years later, because the actual answer wasn't enough to replace it. The interesting thing about the Lost fandom is how many people still defend the finale by arguing the show was always about the characters, not the mythology. Maybe it was, but the show spent 6 seasons pretending the mythology mattered. You can't generate years of audience investment in a question and then say the question was beside the point. You sold the box. You can't open it and tell people the box was never the point. A story that accumulates questions with no intention of answering them is asking the audience to mistake motion for direction. The complexity reads as depth, the unresolved threads read as sophistication. And the audience can't tell the difference between a genuinely complex story and one that has accumulated so many loose threads that no resolution could possibly tie them together. They find out in the finale. There's a concept in storytelling called earning a moment. The audience will believe almost anything a story tells them, as long as the writing has done the work to make it believable. A character can become a villain, can fall in love, can reverse everything they stood for, if the story has laid the groundwork scene by scene. The change accumulates. By the time the moment arrives, the audience already feels it coming. This takes time, real on-screen time, and when writers compress a story's final act, they start cutting that groundwork. They move characters to where the plot needs them to be, without the scenes that would make those positions feel true. The destination is still there. The journey got skipped. What fills the gap is shock. An unexpected turn, a reversal no one saw coming, a character doing something that breaks every pattern the show established. Writers sometimes call this subversion. Real subversion, the kind that makes you rewatch earlier seasons and spot signals you missed the first time, uses surprise to reveal something true, something the story had been pointing toward all along. Shock for its own sake just leaves the audience staring at the gap where logic should be. The confusion writers fall into under deadline pressure is treating foreshadowing and development as the same thing. Foreshadowing is a signal. It proves a destination existed in the writer's plan. Development is the actual work, showing a character traveling toward that destination, scene by scene, choice by choice, in a way the audience can follow and believe. You can foreshadow a character becoming a monster in Season 1. The capacity is seeded, the signal is there. That doesn't mean you've earned the transformation in Season 8. The seed and the tree are different jobs. When writers treat them as equivalent, they produce endings that feel completely inevitable to themselves and completely unearned to the audience. The two groups watched different shows. Game of Thrones spent 7 seasons showing exactly how its world worked. Every major turn was earned. Character decisions followed from character. Consequences played out in full. The show had built a covenant with its audience. We will subvert your expectations, but we will earn every subversion through logic. Then the final season compressed years of story into 6 episodes. HBO offered more time, the showrunners declined, and the covenant broke. A major character's psychological collapse, the kind that needed a full season of deterioration shown on screen, happened across 2 episodes with almost nothing depicted. The seeds had been planted across the series. The capacity for what happened was always there. But the deterioration wasn't shown. The audience was handed the result and expected to fill in the middle. The gap was too large. When critics pointed to earlier seasons as evidence the turn was foreshadowed, they were making a valid argument about intent, and a completely invalid argument about execution. Even Emilia Clarke spoke publicly about struggling to process the speed of the arc. When the person playing the character can't locate the path the script took, the audience has no chance. The compression distorted everything around it. A revelation seeded across 7 seasons, built up as the central mythological secret of the entire series, ended up used as a brief plot device to trigger one character's breakdown, then discarded. 7 seasons of build-up, gone in a scene. The writers had a destination and no runway to reach it properly, so the revelation got repurposed as a mechanism and abandoned. And when the runway shortens, resolutions get handed to whoever is most convenient for the plot. A character who spent 2 seasons watching events unfold from the sidelines was placed at the center of the story's resolution, because the compressed timeline had no room to build a more dynamic conclusion. The audience can feel the writing moving pieces around the board.
Will you wear the crown? Will you lead the 7 kingdoms to the best of your abilities from this day until your last day?
The moment that becomes visible, the story stops feeling alive. And honestly, this is where a lot of shows panic. The assumption is that the ending has to be the biggest thing the show has ever done. More spectacle, larger confrontations. But the finales that work succeed because they're the truest, not the loudest. They answer the question the show was always asking. And when that answer lands, it feels like, of course, that's what this was always building toward. Game of Thrones spent 8 years building toward an existential threat against humanity. That threat was resolved in a single episode. Not because the resolution was emotionally right, but because the compressed timeline needed it cleared to make room for the political endgame. It looked incredible. I just didn't feel much. But while some shows rush toward an unearned ending, others are terrified of ending at all. When a show succeeds, the network wants more of it. Another season, another after that. The story designed to run 4 seasons runs for 7, the one built for 3 gets pushed to 6, and writers face a problem they didn't plan for. How do you keep a story moving when you've run out of story? The answer most shows land on is the reset. Every season ends with the characters overcoming some enormous threat, and begins with those characters in roughly the same position they were in before. The world is dangerous again. The core relationships are intact. What happened last season didn't permanently change anything. The baseline is restored. What this creates is a treadmill. The characters are running hard. The episodes are full of stakes and confrontations and genuinely emotional moments. But at the end of each season, they haven't moved anywhere. It feels like the story is moving forward, even when nothing is really changing. As a viewer, you feel this even when you can't name it. The tension drains slowly, season by season. You start watching with a bit more distance, a bit more detachment. A show that always restores its baseline is training its audience to expect the baseline to always be restored. And when the finale finally arrives trying to deliver something permanent and irreversible, your instinct is to wait for the reset, because the reset always comes. The Boys demonstrates this almost perfectly. The series started as a sharp, genuinely dangerous satire. Early seasons had something rare in long-running television, the sense that anything could permanently change. Characters could actually lose. The world of the show could shift in ways that stuck. Then the show settled into a cycle. You can feel it if you watch the seasons back to back, the same shape repeating, slightly louder each time. Every season, one side floats something morally extreme. Everyone argues about it for most of the season. The cautious approach blows up. The group fractures, reunites, goes with the extreme plan, wins temporarily. Then the board resets. New season, same positions. Homelander is still on top. Billy is still furious. And because nothing is allowed to permanently stick, nothing that happens seemed to permanently change them. So the show started reaching for something else to hold interest. More graphic content, more outrageous provocations. Escalation in place of consequence. Stranger Things ran the same formula on a different register. Watch the season structures side by side, and the repetition becomes almost rhythmic. The first season was intimate and contained. The threat felt real, partly because it was small enough to be fully felt. Then the show grew, and each new season needed to be larger than the last. The cast splinters into subgroups around episode 3. A monster gets confirmed around the midpoint. The cast reunites. 11 closes the gate. Board cleared. New season, roughly the same starting position. I watched the final season knowing I could feel it, that whatever happened, it was going to resolve. Not because the writing gave me hope, but because the show had spent 4 seasons conditioning that expectation into me. Every threat had resolved before. Every gate had closed. When the finale tried to produce stakes that felt permanent and irreversible, it was fighting 4 seasons of its own training. I believed the threat intellectually, I didn't feel it the way I felt season 1. The show had spent years teaching me not to. The shows that avoid this failure share one quality. They let events accumulate. Characters are permanently changed by what happens to them. The world of the show actually shifts between seasons and carries those changes forward. This requires a courage the business model of television actively discourages. The network wants the show they commissioned to remain the show they commissioned. But a show that refuses to let anything permanently matter is building toward a finale that cannot matter either. A character isn't who they were in the first episode. They're who they've become. Every season of a long-running show is partly a story of change. Characters make mistakes and learn from them. They encounter things that shift who they are. They move away from the people they were when the show started. The audience watches this happen in real time, and that accumulated movement is a significant part of what makes them care. The investment isn't just in who a character is, it's in where they've been going. This creates a hard obligation for a finale. The ending has to honor who the characters became, not who they were when the show was first designed. A finale that snaps characters back to their season 1 selves implies the arc never mattered. Every scene spent watching someone change gets retroactively emptied out. The rewatch collapses almost immediately, because now the audience knows the journey was motion without a destination. The worst version of this failure is when writers plan an ending early, before the show has fully become what it actually is, and then execute that plan years later, regardless of the gap between what they originally conceived and who the characters actually turned out to be. Characters develop through the pressure of writing, performance, and time. They become more fully realized than the original conception. Actors find dimensions the script didn't plan for. Writers discover things about the characters in the process of writing them. Moments where a scene lands differently than expected, where a choice opens up something the outline never anticipated. The show evolves. And if the ending was locked in before that evolution happened, the finale ends up answering a question the show stopped asking years ago. The plan gets made in year 1. The show becomes something else over the following years. The writers remain obligated to deliver the original plan. How I Met Your Mother is the textbook case. The creators filmed their final scene in the 2nd season, years before the show ended, to lock in the ending while the child actors were still young enough to play their parts. The logic was completely practical. The consequences were catastrophic. By the time the finale aired, the characters had spent 7 more years becoming people the early season ending couldn't account for. The writers honored the plan and abandoned the show, through loyalty to something that no longer existed. What that produces reframes everything that came before it. If this was always where the characters were going to end up, then the seasons spent watching them move somewhere else weren't building toward anything real. The audience feels it as a betrayal. not of the ending, but of the investment they made watching the transformation. Years of character development, pointing toward an ending designed before the characters were fully themselves. Stranger Things ran into this problem differently. The show's cast grew up on screen. Literally, the actors aged from children to young adults across 8 years of production. The emotional logic of who these people were in season 1 gave way to who they'd genuinely become by season 5. But the show's structure was built around the original dynamic. Kids in danger, 11 as the weapon, the group as the heart. The finale tried to honor both the original dynamic and who these people had grown into, and ended up fully honoring neither. You can feel the gap between them in every scene of the final season. All of this failure analysis is useful, but it stays abstract until you look at the shows that got it right. When you understand why they worked, the pattern becomes obvious. Each one had a question it was answering, planted in the first episode, and the finale delivered that answer. Breaking Bad spent 5 seasons on the gap between what Walter White claimed about himself and what he actually was. He told everyone, including himself, that he was doing it for his family. The finale required him to admit, out loud, that he was doing it for himself. Vince Gilligan wrote an elaborate action set piece into the final season and admitted publicly he had no idea why Walter was going to use it. He found the answer so difficult to write that he nearly abandoned the sequence entirely. The solution he landed on was spectacular in every sense, but the scene that carried the finale's real weight, just the truth, finally said out loud,
"One more time that you did this for the family."
I did it for me.
Every season of the show had orbited that scene. The spectacle was how they got there. The Sopranos built its entire run around one question: what does it cost to live the life this character chose? The finale refused a conventional answer. No dramatic confrontation, no moment of clear judgment, just an ordinary dinner, the awareness that it could end at any second, and then silence. The audience experienced the same uncertainty Tony Soprano lived with every day. David Chase didn't give audiences a resolution Tony himself could never possess. The show's argument became something you had to feel from the inside. I watched that finale with a friend who was furious. Cut to black, that's it? And I understood the frustration. But the more I sat with it, the more I understood what Chase was doing. He put you exactly where Tony was, waiting for something that might never come, or might come any second. The finale didn't conclude the argument. It made you live inside it. Succession spent 4 years asking what power costs you and who you become in the process. The finale answered that directly. I remember watching the last episode and feeling, in real time, the things snapping into place. Then going back through earlier seasons and finding moments that hit completely differently. A throwaway line in season 2 that now felt like it had been waiting for you. A character beat that looked like filler and was actually load-bearing. The finale gave the whole series new meaning. You can feel those shows moving towards something from the very beginning. Writers fail finales because they're navigating forces that pull in every direction, except toward the truth of their own story. The shows that got it right knew the answer before they knew the story. They had a question planted in the first episode and a direction written toward from the start. The surprises lived within that destination. When the finale arrived, it felt like, of course, because it was designed that way. That's the contract, the one the writer makes with the story before they make it with the audience. And the damage when it breaks is lasting. Someone discovering Game of Thrones today has to navigate years of discourse about Season 8 before watching a single episode. The knowledge that the ending disappointed changes the calculation of committing to 8 seasons of television. And in a world where there is always another show to watch, many people just won't. The Dexter revival is the clearest proof. The original finale was so badly received that Showtime funded a limited series years later designed to correct the record. The revival also failed. An audience returning for a second chance arrives carrying the first wound. Failing that test a second time closes the property. A great finale gives a show's entire run new meaning. Every beloved character moment gets amplified by where it ends up. The show rewards rewatching. A failed finale does the opposite.
Not everyone deserves a happy ending.
Every beloved scene gets colored by the knowledge of where it ends. The investment feels wasted, and the show becomes something people warn each other away from. The difference between those two outcomes is a writer who knows what question they're asking and commits to answering it, regardless of how the box looks when it's finally opened. That's it for this one. Thank you so much for the support. Check out the video on your screen for more, and I'll catch you over there.